icon pop up on your screen that you accept the recording. So I don't know how much you'll learn about the Alliance tonight, but you will learn that we don't all agree. I can safely say that. And that we do struggle with different positions that are necessarily outside the basics of monetary reform. And so Carly gave us a interesting word several months ago called intersectionality. And so what these position papers are about, one of which we'll discuss tonight, is about the intersectionality between money reform or monetary reform, whichever you want to call it, and the major issues of today. Those major issues could be from what we'll talk about tonight, which is universal health care. They could be taxation, education, a universal basic income, a job guarantee, wealth disparity. And the reason that we wanted to write position papers on these is very basic. And the basic principle behind it was, how do we get people interested in monetary reform beyond just a small collection of people who are interested in money reform? The vast majority of people, I'm sure in all your discussions and in anybody who's had discussions with people regarding how the money system sets up, is that it's a mind-numbing topic for most people. Most people simply just don't care. And so how do we get them interested in monetary reform? And so one of the ways we thought we could do that is by publishing certain position papers on topics that affect them. And so if we're talking about universal health care or a job guarantee or UBI or education or some of those other things, maybe that could be the draw that brings them into monetary reform, that shows them how monetary reform can actually solve those issues. Instead of just focusing strictly on the three prongs of getting rid of the Federal Reserve, absorbing it into the Treasury and creating money, expanding that thought process to include other people's thoughts and showing them that monetary reform is an actual solution to the problems that they find important in their lives. So with that, what we're going to do is kind of highlight the struggle we went through in writing just the first paper, just the first one on universal health care, which doesn't seem like it would be much, but we've met several times and we've had literally pages of emails going back and forth about how it should be structured. And I think one thing we did realize is that coming in is that into this is that everybody has their own individual biases about what they want to see. And so we struggled with what was the message we wanted to put out. Was the message more, this is how we can get it done and comparing ourselves to other countries, or lowering cost, or don't worry about cost, or what is that goal? And so I think we agree that the goal is still to make sure that universal healthcare is affordable to everyone. Now, obviously, this is just in this country. Other countries may not have this particular issue, but in the United States, it is a pretty big issue. So we're going to show a couple of different slide presentations, and then we're going to go around to each member of the committee and let them discuss what they brought to the table, what they found that was difficult, and what is the question or questions that they want help answering from this group. And so while the first 15 minutes or so will be us talking, we want input. We want some direction on how we should proceed on these position papers, because we do think they are important. And we don't want to, necessarily waste our time going back and forth debating our various positions. We would like some clear direction, or at least some input from people on what they think is the best way to move forward. So I think that's all I want to cover immediately with that. So I'll ask Paul and Virginia, do you guys want to pose the questions before we proceed? It may make more sense to pose the questions before we proceed to the slideshow, or do the slideshows first and then go with what our individual questions are. This is one question we didn't answer yesterday. Let me go with Paul first. What do you think, Paul?
Well, if I had the questions in front of me, I would say it would make more sense to put the questions first.
Okay, that's what
So
I
that
was thinking too.
when
I'll ask everybody else. Mary?
yeah,
I was hoping that you and Virginia would mention, before showing each of your slideshows, a couple of the questions that we struggled over in your particular versions.
Okay, that's fine. Virginia?
Oh, mute.
You're fine.
I didn't bring my notes up for that, so it's going to be off the top of my head, because we went back and forth for several weeks.
Well, we can start with somebody else if you want to grab your notes.
Yeah,
It sounds like we're going to choose to do questions first. So
Okay.
Can I maybe share the medium that I was thinking we should share these? Like I'll go into.
let me go backwards. Let me go backwards just a little bit, because I did want to mention that Carly was a later addition, who has been actually invaluable, because she brings us insight from a much younger perspective and knows a lot more about social media mediums than we do, obviously. And so she showed us a concept early on. Initially, we were just going to do position papers and put them on the website. But once we talked to Carly, she showed us a very interesting platform that we could use to put out all these position papers, starting with the universal healthcare one. So Carly, yeah, talk a little bit about the platform and what you think it brings.
Cool. I will get started and then you all gather your notes. So, yeah, I am a later addition to the position papers subcommittee. When I first heard about this little project that Mary, Virginia, Paul, and Mark are working on, as somebody who participates frequently in social media, that's, it's how I communicate with my peers. It's how I access a lot of information. I got to thinking, like, what if we use social media as a way to get this information out there. And one of my favorite ways of accessing information on topics that I'm not super familiar with is through Instagram. And I follow a wide array of influencers who use slideshows on Instagram. And so basically what it is it's anywhere from 2 to 10, sometimes more slides, kind of like a PowerPoint. And it is a way for folks to get information out there. So the first slide is something that's going to catch your attention and spark your curiosity. And then, if it's something that, does spark your curiosity, then you can view the slideshow and learn more and then share it if you want to. So for instance, we started with healthcare. So our first slide is how we pay for universal healthcare. So if somebody's interested in universal healthcare and making that accessible in the United States, then, they might think like, well, what is this about? How can we pay for that? Is that a possibility? And then you look at the slideshow and hopefully think, hey, maybe this is possible with Just Money, and let me go look at the Alliance for Just Money website and learn more about what Just Money is, because I don't know what that is. And then from there, they would learn more information. So that was, I guess, my contribution to this subcommittee. We don't have an Instagram page yet, but I would like for us to get to that point. And then also these slideshows can be shared through Facebook, and they can also be used as like a PowerPoint presentation. So that is kind of my thought behind the slideshows that you're about to see. And I would love feedback on how you all feel about that. I know it's maybe something a little new and different, but I would like to see more information from the Alliance and other money groups to be shared through this platform. I think it will be helpful.
Mark, can I say something, Mark?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, we kind of had an agenda here, but what's happening here, and it's kind of experimental. It's a little bit of inside baseball. we're kind of showing you some of the struggles that we go through, and hopefully in the process, you'll get a better feel for what our core beliefs are and our core positions are. And we are looking for feedback from people just to see what the reaction is. I'm kind of a fundamentalist when it comes to monetary reform. And I feel that before any of these things like universal basic income, even public banking, all these good things can happen, monetary reform or monetary transformation has to happen first. So, so one side of this discussion was more the fundamentalist side, that we don't really have to get into the nitty-gritty detail about what what other causes are, other than to point out that we enable these causes. The other flip side of it was that, well, maybe we need to be a little bit more explicit and at least list what some of the options are for each of these different goals that people have, and point out how monetary reform can, again, be an enabling condition to allow all these things to bear fruit. Another aspect of this, which we'll get into, was, our name is the Alliance for Just Money. And it took us quite a while to come up with that name. And so justice is built into it. So we can't really be too removed. We can't take a hands-off attitude towards this. We're talking about social justice. And the problem with that is it's a political trigger for some. And you'll see we were struggling with that. How much of the justice aspect do we want to impart in our message? So in these slide presentations, you'll see that coming in, and that was one of the points of contention. Not that that the members of the group didn't feel that justice was important, but whether or not it's something that we wanted to include in our message. So be on the lookout for that. Again, this is an experiment. We don't have like a fixed formal presentation. We really are looking for feedback from the folks that are here. So just wanted to point that out at this point.
Thanks, Paul. So and under this particular one, I wrote the original position paper on universal healthcare. Shared it with the group, got feedback, and that's when I first realized that we don't actually agree on a lot of stuff. So that's when this all started. And so my questions regarding, or my questions or biases, or however you want to describe it, in going into this was, I want to use monetary reform to unify divided positions in opposition. And how can that be done without making anyone necessarily a boogeyman or pointing to people and saying almost it's your fault in a sense? I always consider monetary reforms somewhat of a grand bargain between what I would consider capitalistic industries and businesses and the 99%, which is what I think we really care about generally in monetary reform. That was first. The second thing that I wanted to stress was that I don't want to necessarily use current world solutions to solve problems in a new monetary or monetary reform environment. And what I mean is that, and I've heard other people talk about it in the past, is that if you change the money system, then you really change how you view money and the effects that it can have on your life. One good example is that people save money for retirement, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that. But with monetary reform, you can eliminate the need for people to have to save money. What does that do to the psyche? And so a lot of times when we think about monetary reform, well, Social Security will continue to exist, and all these other programs, TANF and all these other programs that benefit people, Section 8 will continue to exist, when in actuality, they really don't. And so we can really rethink the monopoly game and how we want it to work. And so that's what I like to keep in the back of my mind when we're talking about this. The other thing I want to stress is that we didn't feel like anybody's position was wrong. We just we weren't sure how to present it as an alliance. And so we even got to the point where it's like, well, maybe we should just have different papers with a disclaimer that this one was written by Mark Young or this one was written by Virginia Hammond. That's not my preference. My preference is to kind of build consensus because I think it helps the reader understand that as the Alliance, we have a single position on how we view stuff, even though that ultimately may not be possible. That's what I would wish for. So those are my questions that I had. Let's go to Mary. What were your questions that you had for the group?
First of all, I want everybody in attendance to realize that we're trying to frame the healthcare problem and how monetary reform would change things to pay for healthcare in 10 slides. So it's a little embarrassing to come before people I don't even know and admit that we're so human and we talk past each other sometimes and all that, but we're still trying, and it's a very ambitious goal in my view. I failed to make a slideshow, but from the conversations have been rich and rewarding. And what I have taken away from them, like as of today, was the scarcity angle. I feel like if we framed the healthcare as what is the bottleneck for healthcare, it's scarce money. Scarce money in the current bank money system seems to be the bottleneck for paying for important things like healthcare. And I feel like if we framed it that way, then we could quickly go in without getting off on tangents or side topics. We could quickly go into, if the problem is stated as scarce money, then monetary reform fixes it by returning the gain of newly created money to the people's treasury, not the bankers' vaults, and by putting elected officials in charge of prioritizing the use of money rather than bankers. To me, that could fit on 10 slides, but the topic is much bigger, and we have this super cool ongoing discussion about what needs to be included. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Let's go to Virginia.
Well, you covered part of it, which was the issue of values and what values our organization really wants to lead with, both in assessing what the problem is and assessing what the solutions might be. And I'm a strong advocate for focusing on justice. I don't want to present solutions that are not just. And I also I'm really comfortable with having multiple approaches. One of the things none of us have really succeeded at in any substantial way is connecting with very broad audiences. And we're kind of clueless about where the wedge is. How do we get in? Who's going to respond with the most enthusiasm? Is it old people, young people, women, men, progressives, Democrats? We don't have a sense. So I'm all for trying, throwing the spaghetti up on the wall. Let's try a lot of different approaches and see what gets a response. What are people connecting to? And because that was kind of part of what my hope was for the How We Pay road trip, it would really be an opportunity to directly connect with many audiences. And it's so much easier to read a room and hear questions and watch faces and see what kind of response you're getting with real people. And since we can't do that, I'm all for different approaches. And I think the questions that we had in looking at these, we have two somewhat different approaches. And the questions that came up and that we argued substantially over are more apparent if you're actually looking at the slides, I think. But one of the issues, we're all looking for some kind of common denominator. What is it that will speak to the most people? And we had a little bit of a difference there. In that I think Mark and Mary were looking for solutions that were broad enough, and enough of them that someone would say, oh, yeah, that's a solution I would like to see money spent on. And for me, I wanted to focus more on the common denominator is healthcare for everyone. I mean, that's, few people argue that they don't want everybody to be healthy. Some argue that they don't want everybody to have healthcare. That's certainly true. But in general, that's the hook. And then probably in my slideshow, there is more emphasis on connecting the problems in healthcare directly to the way the money system functions. For me, that is the why we need to change it. We need to change the money system, not just because we need more money to do things. For me, it is not just a scarcity issue. It is a structural problem issue with the money system itself. And I might even point out, to some extent, the scarcity point is what MMT is arguing. Oh, we can just keep creating all the money we need and pay for any of these solutions and we're good. And so that's one reason my focus is on, well, no, you can't do that, because the existing money system itself has values built into it that are damaging. So we need to address those, and they do relate to healthcare. And in any more specificity, it would probably help if you were looking at the two different slideshows and could see those two different approaches. And I mean, maybe we could run through them just at an ordinary speed, and then we could,
yeah, we will.
But then we could go back and, you know, we could highlight, for instance, it was really pretty clear. Several of my slides really, you know, wait a minute. So
Let's look at Virginia's now. That's a good introduction, and people can reflect.
Well, let's go to Carly first, so we can get her questions.
Give me 1 second. All right. Let me see.
Are you just going to do your slide, Carly, or were you going to address your question?
Oh, hold on.
That's what you want to do. That's fine too.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
No, you're fine. Just go ahead. Look, what we'll do is Carly kind of sat back and watched us a lot anyway. So I think she was there just to kind of be a ref to make sure we stay focused, didn't get too far off into our own monetary reform thoughts and musings. So this is basically the slide that she came up with. And I'll let you introduce it, but I just want to know that Virginia also came up with a slide package that kind of pushed or kind of outlined her views. And so that's what we're going to look at next. So go ahead, Carly.
Thank you. So yeah, this slideshow that I created is based off of Mark's paper. So I will walk you all through it, and then Virginia can share hers, and then you will definitely see the difference between the two slideshows and what really stood out for Mark and what stood out for Virginia when talking about universal health care. So this is just a sampling of what a slideshow could look like. Oops. So, sorry. Starts with how we pay for universal health care. Great, tell me more. The systemic problem with healthcare. The cost of healthcare is higher than most can afford. We all are faced with health conditions, whether personally or through our loved ones. Chronic and catastrophic care for life-threatening diseases have a high cost, i.e. diabetes, heart disease, cancer, the list goes on, as does the cost of healthcare as we get older. Why is insurance so expensive? Well, healthcare itself is costly due to providers, technology, bureaucracy, pharmaceuticals, etc. These high costs drive up insurance premiums that everyone must pay. The overall cost must be subsidized by taxpayers and employers through government programs like Medicaid, employer managed insurance, and the Affordable Care Act. We need to change our current money system through money reform, defined as returning the power of money creation from the private, profit-driven banking system back to the US Treasury and elected Congress. Money reform replaces our current system of money creation, which is solely the result of commercial bank lending. Instead, money could be created directly by the government without debt as an asset. Some call it sovereign money, we call it just money. Here's how. Just money reform simply gives our government the power to create money as needed through a keystroke, as commercial banks do now, instead of having to borrow to support the public good. This power has been used before by our government and is guaranteed through Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Our government gave this power away in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and solving most of our societal ills involves taking this power back and restoring it to our government and Congress. When we pass legislation for just money reform, a variety of solutions are possible to address the nation's healthcare problems. With just money, for example, we can keep the current system and increase the amount subsidies provided to individuals and families to make premiums affordable. Or with just money, we can control the cost to individuals by providing direct subsidy to hospitals, pharmaceutical and medical device companies to lower their costs and thereby lower the cost to insurance companies and thereby the cost of premiums. Or with just money, we can restructure our system and remove the high cost drivers. The government could pay directly for end-of-life costs, extended hospital stays, major surgeries, and disease treatments. Or with just money, last and certainly not least, we can end health insurance altogether. In this system, healthcare is a human right provided to all, regardless of income. Hashtag just money now. Just money reform makes it possible to rethink our current healthcare system and imagine a system that solves this long-standing problem that has been such a burden to our country for decades. Find out more and join us at monetaryalliance.org and howwepay.us. So that is what I came up with based off of Mark's paper. Is it wordy? Yes. Do I think that's necessarily a bad thing? No. Do I think that we can condense the verbiage a little bit? Yes. But I think
Can you talk a
does
little
a
bit
pretty
more about the platform also and how this works on a mobile device, and a little bit more about I don't know if you have that one slide that showed us somebody else's page that had all these different subjects on it. I
Oh
wanted to get
yeah,
an idea
hold
of
on.
how this whole project would work out in a
So
sense.
I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. New tab. So the platform that I'm mostly thinking of is Instagram, which Instagram is it's mostly a place where you can share images and these slideshows. So what I like about Instagram is that you can categorize your posts. So whereas like on Facebook, you can post a million different things and you might post the same like 5 topics, you know, that could be like what the majority of your posts are. For instance, like on my social media, I usually share anything to do like right now with COVID, BLM, disability rights, and money reform. So, you know, I might share a million posts that relate to that, but that information just kind of gets lost in my timeline and other people's timelines. And so on Instagram, you can actually categorize your posts, and I will show you what I mean. So if you can see here, this is just one thread that I follow it, so you want to talk about. And up here, there's, you can see it's broken up into reading items, action items, frequently asked questions, quotes, series, which the series are the slideshows that I want to post on money reform or just money. So my thought would be we could have an Instagram page that talks about, we could have a tab that's all about just money. What is that? What does it look like? How can we make it happen? So anything related to just money would go into this tab. And then we could have another one that talks about the NEED Act. So we could have a series of slideshows that go into the NEED Act and what that is. And then we could have another section that talks about healthcare. So any information that we put out there that has to do with healthcare, we could tag it into here. So that way, if somebody goes to our Instagram page, they can go directly to what they're looking for. Or they can also see a million other posts that are made. So that's kind of the platform that I'm thinking about. And you can also share whatever you share on Instagram to Facebook, well, I'm not sure about Facebook to Instagram, but you can share across both sites. And so that is the platform that I'm thinking about. And like I said, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but in groups that I follow, when there are informative slides, the information isn't always like really short. They do go into detail, which is why I think that the slideshow that I created off of Mark's paper is okay in that sense.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Carly.
Hey, do you mind if I hop in really quick, just as an outsider and someone new to the organization? I think this is the direction that you need to go if you want to get your message out. I think in a lot of social justice movements and a lot of progressive movements currently, this is the way that information is formatted to build a following and to build the movement. I don't think there's any substitution for the good intellectual thought leadership that this organization does in meetings like this, but taking the information, making it concise, making it look attractive, and turning it into a brain hook is unfortunately the world we live in. And so I think that all of the operational work that I presume you're doing to generate the content just needs to have an interface with these other platforms. And the presentation she just put together is exactly what happens in the other predominant social media marketplaces, not marketplaces, but networks, Twitter and Facebook. And I think you are really lucky that Carly is bringing this to your organization, and I'd like to also help make it a success.
Well, that's good. Everybody get his name, number, address, everything else, because we will be calling you.
I'll take it down.
Okay, let's go to Virginia. Virginia, do you have your slide ready? Your slideshow ready?
Yeah, I do.
Sure.
Like,
All right.
yeah. Oh. So I wanted to say I have a millennial son who, whatever I present to him, he always says, that's too long. It doesn't matter how short it is. He always says, that's too long. So that's partly what weighs heavily on me. So how we pay for healthcare for everyone. I actually prefer leaving out the word universal just because that triggers a political solution, but most people want everyone to have healthcare. And 43% of us are stressed about getting the healthcare we need. Why? Well, uninsured increased in 2018, 2019, 2020. Pre-pandemic, 28 million people under the age of 65 had no health insurance, 15% of us. 44 million were underinsured, another 28%. 43% of Americans have no health security. Costs are high, affordability is low, and we don't get what we pay for. Why? US healthcare averages $11,000 per person. Switzerland is next highest at 8,000. The rest of the developed world averages 5,000 to 6,000. The US is number 34 in life expectancy and 33 in infant mortality. Profits are prioritized over people. Why? A money system is a dominating influence on society. Our money system is profit, debt, and exploitation driven. Consequently, the drive for profits controls our healthcare system. Profit making is fine. It's wrong when people are allowed to die to keep profits high. Money is created as debt by private bankers when they make loans. Bankers aim to make a profit. That's okay, just not on creating our money supply. This power gives them a privilege no other business has. Banker profits determine our money supply, not the needs of the people. Can we change this? Yes. We, the people, take back the power to create the money supply. No debt necessary. We choose where new money goes first. With the debt interest burden removed, costs will be lowered. We can afford to pay for healthcare for all. Additional taxation is optional and no excess inflation. The US Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to create our money supply. Changing the money will not fix the cost, quality, and availability of healthcare, but it will make fixing it possible. How? Just money makes fixing healthcare possible. It would remove the money power's domination in decision-making, provide for adequate spending on prevention, reducing costs, make decisions based on what's best for people instead of what can make the most profits for a few. Just money could pay for healthcare for all. Imagine healthcare for all and make it possible with just money now. Learn more at howwepay.us and monetaryalliance.org.
Thanks, Virginia.
Mhm.
Can you stop sharing, if you don't mind?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Whoa, where's the stop? No, my mouse just.
So look up top. There you go. Okay. Thanks, Virginia and Carly. And so that kind of sets up the dynamic that caused the debate within our own group. I'll just point out a couple of highlights, and anybody else that was in the group can also point out the highlights. I think we agreed on a lot of stuff. I think Virginia's focus was more on how we lower cost as a solution also. That was not in the solution that I put in my position paper. And there were reasons for that, and we can discuss it and we can go back and forth. But those were kind of, if you notice the difference between those, they may seem subtle to somebody outside looking in. I don't know, but they seemed like a great divide for us while we were
Yes.
doing it. And so with that, I would like to open up the stack just to give some initial comments on what you think, what you thought was our direction, the right direction. Also keeping in mind the questions that we posed.
Mark,
Up front.
you're freezing up now, I think.
When we first went
You
around
want
to
to
everybody.
quickly explain,
Yes, sir. Okay, well, I'll let
quickly
you
explain
you
the
heard what I
stack
was saying, so
system?
go ahead and, why don't you go ahead? If I'm freezing up, you go ahead.
Yeah, okay. With discussions, we use the stack system. You type in stack into the chat. The chat you will find at the bottom bar under all the little pictures. Click on it and then, send to everybody just stack. And I will keep track of it and call you out then in chronological order. Sometimes I screw up the chronological order and I'll get corrected. But that's how we kind of roll. So we'll start with Mike Holden. He's the first one on the stack. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Can you see me? Am I coming through? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks for hosting tonight. This is definitely, I think, an important subject for the organization because, you sort of have to establish the space that you exist. And what I'd like to say, first of all, is I think any approach to improving visibility is going to be beneficial for the organization. So apart from any content, I would say that any kind of approach that we take, I think, and we should take multiple different approaches, that would be effective. So on the content side, in this case, we are establishing some kind of a position on the sort of correlation or support that the Alliance for Just Money would have with some kind of a national healthcare system. And first of all, you have to sort of approach it from how you're establishing the correlation. And in my opinion, again, looking at it from the point of view of, say, regardless of the content, the approach that we take to sort of harmonize these two approaches is that we both agree that the public control over the monetary system and the public control over the healthcare system would be beneficial for society. And so that's the structural similarity that you have between both organizations. And that's why they theoretically could be synergistic to your efforts. And so I think apart from, again, how you achieve the goal of using monetary reform to facilitate the national healthcare system, we can say affirmatively that the Alliance for Just Money supports national healthcare system due to the structural similarity in the aims and goals. So I think that's the first thing you have to establish. And again, that requires that you sort of say that the market control over healthcare is something that needs to be reformed. And so again, those two approaches are very synergistic, right? And I think that establishing the position is irrespective of goals or irrespective of methods for achieving those goals. That's something I think that statement is, something that people could agree with. And that could be the position that we take. And then we could speculate, as an organization, is, well, what could you do with monetary reform and the national healthcare system? My approach, of course, I support a rigorous methodological scientific approach. So I would support, understanding, first of all, computational modeling, for systems dynamics to understand how all of this works, to really form an opinion on, how and why we should implement these specific reforms, right? That would be the approach that I would want to take. And
Mike, if I may, you have a question.
Well, no, we will take comments also, so it doesn't have to.
Okay,
It's fine.
Mike, go on.
We really just want to hear people's opinion, whether that's a question or a statement. So go ahead, Mike.
No, this is good. This is good.
So, well, anyways, the main point I wanted to make is, again, regardless of how you want to achieve the goal of monetary reform and supplementing the national healthcare system with monetary reform, we can all agree that that is an objective, right? So again, approaching it from a more rigorous point of view in terms of understanding the most effective way to distribute money for, social goals, and having the goal of, say, well, we want to have, people live healthier, happier lives, again, which is taken for granted, in our current system, it's sort of, obviously, as we know, totally parasitic, that people are making money off of the suffering of others, and it's totally unacceptable. But I guess it's like a simple thing that you could agree on. So anyways, those are my comments for right now. If you're asking me for a question, no, I didn't really have a question.
You're fine.
So this approach was not, in terms of sort of what I was, a question for you, but my opinion on what you're saying. Again, I appreciate you doing this because it is something that I think that is important for the Alliance to establish a viewpoint on, and I'd like to see this happen, going forward. Things that are sort of, as far as a position, so that there is no disagreement. You can have sort of a large scale or sort of a high level statement for your position, right? So this is the position, and then we can speculate as far as, well, what's the most effective way of implementing that kind of a reform? So that's my position. Mike, over.
Thanks, sir.
All right, I think Virginia put something there as a response. So I would first let Virginia tell her response.
My apologies to Liam. I was inadvertently sending it messages privately. The slides actually don't say universal healthcare is the right solution. I do think the most important thing for us to be saying is that we want to remove that power of money from making decisions, or having the power to control how decisions are made and ultimately what those decisions are. And then you only get one little teeny tiny line, but I also think that providing adequate spending on prevention is a critical component of fixing healthcare. If you're going to let the money power keep poisoning us all, the air, water, the food, then it's going to keep costing a whole lot of money. And so I really feel strongly that the moment we get into specifics, when you start saying, well, we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do this, or we could do that. I'm not an expert on healthcare, and it's an extraordinarily complex, as Mark pointed out, it's things done for profit, things done not for profit, all of the different components of a healthcare system. I would just as soon stay out of that and not try and talk about what those options are at all, unless I'm on a one-to-one with somebody and they're saying, well, what could we do this?
All right, somebody else still wants to?
Well, I want to hear what people have to say. So, you have
Sure.
Thomas. I know Mark Pash has his hand raised. Jerome.
Yeah, I
Sloan.
lost track of Mark Pash, but let's first go then to Thomas Wilda.
Okay, well, first of
There
all,
you
I
go.
want to
Hello.
say, are you there?
Yeah, we hear you.
I want to say really thanks to all you guys for doing this work. It's really great. I agree with Mike about we can make it uh, these two issues really synergistic. I didn't hear anything about healthcare being a right, a basic human right, in either of those two presentations, however. And I think that's sort of important to focus on. And we're not talking about how can we make it better. I don't think we would say, free speech, let's try and make free speech better. But begin with saying free speech is a right, basic human right. And I think we want to do the same thing with healthcare. I think we can, the a connection we can certainly make to that is that there's a basic human right to share equally in the resources and in the human benefits of society. So we've got some basic human rights, and we can really focus on those things. In the presentation that Kylie gave, I noticed that what was missing in terms of the reason healthcare gets to be so much money or cost so much is that under our present insurance system, insurance companies are in their philosophy are morally obligated to provide profits for their stockholders. And the only way to do that in the insurance industry is to be able to take money and then not pay that much out. So it creates a false scarcity in terms of what's really available for healthcare. And that's also the argument for monetary reform. The idea with the way we produce money or create money today creates a false scarcity. And it doesn't have to be that way. So those are a couple comments. The other thing I noticed that in terms of Virginia, we don't want to get too into the complexity of healthcare. Things that are too complex usually are that way because they don't want people to understand. Or that comment by Upton Sinclair, men don't understand or people don't understand their job or what goes on in their job if a part of keeping their jobs requires them not to understand it. So we know that about over 70% of Republicans support universal health care, national health care, and way over 80% of Democrats do. So I don't think we have to worry really about saying, that we're for a universal health care or even a Medicare for all, because, I think about 9 out of 10, 8 or 9 out of 10 people would understand that. So those are a couple of things. I think the two great slides. I tweak them a little bit, but they're nice. I also like Kylie's idea of using Instagram. I don't know that much about social media, so when I need to do a lot of stuff on social media, have someone help me. But that looks great. So thanks a lot. I guess I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Thomas. I had Liam as next, but I think he withdrew again his stack.
Yeah, well, I didn't understand the stack system, but now that I do, I'll quick throw my 2 cents in, which I already pasted. Is that I think if the organization is looking to build awareness, breaking down the basics of Just Money in kind of the first series of social media releases to set the stage. And then building on that, you can show a plurality of effects downstream in specific arenas that might grab people's attention. You could have a whole series on healthcare where it says, this could support universal healthcare. This could support, it supports all of these potential positive changes to our healthcare system. So And then it keeps the focus on what the organization's real target, as far as I can see, is, which is that the monetary reform is the catalyst for all of this. And you're not trying to take a stake in this or that healthcare detail specifically. But thank you.
Your suggestion is to start with slides on just money or money reform.
Well, I would build a little bit of content with that in mind and get that out just sitting there on your platform. Then I would build up maybe a few months of release content so that you have a pipeline ready. Because the whole thing with these applications is that consistency matters. And as far as I know, I don't do any social media management, but I can tell accounts usually have a whole backlog of content that's ready to go and that it's set to release incrementally, so that you might even start before you spend $1 on marketing. And it's a sad thing to say, but if the organization does have any untapped funds, marketing on these platforms, targeted marketing on these platforms, is potentially very valuable in getting your first set of followers. So I would advise that you have potentially between 2 and 3 months of content prepared before you begin. There's applications that let you set the whole pipeline up so that it's automatically released at the right times. And so, maybe the first month you set the stage with, all the good content you have about just money. And then you have a 3-month pipeline where, once a week there's a new post and a new video, a new slide set or whatever it is that goes into one of these buckets, whether it's UBI or healthcare or education or, environment. And then all of a sudden you're starting to create some momentum. But that's kind of a complex operation. So it's just good to keep in mind.
That's extremely helpful. Boy, you guys make me feel old. I feel like I don't know anything about anything anymore. Okay, go ahead, Gilbert. I think. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I got Jerome Slody as the next one. Jerome, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Gilbert, and all. Sloat, and the to a certain extent, I wanted to echo what Liam just said in a slightly different way, to say that a slideshow, an Instagram slideshow, is in effect a check that an actual position paper has to clear with specifics. And one of the thoughts I had, in particularly in Virginia's presentation, is, as I understand it, money reform or just money is not going to do away with the profit motive in healthcare or in cutting corners on environmental protection or in the defense industrial complex. As I understand it, just money can offer a little bit more control of that first spend of new money. After that, the players who receive and then pay along will have the same profitability imperative as they do now. And I'm wondering if anybody would. So that is, so if that is not the case, then that is something that that a position paper has to make very clear, I think.
Can I ask you to clarify that question? I'm not sure in reference to my slideshow, because I do say, profit's okay. It's just not okay to kill people in the name of profits. And I wasn't sure what you were saying about profit making with regard. Can you clarify that?
Yes, it has to do with whether money reform remakes the whole profit, whether it changes the incentives for any people along the way to let's say cut corners in insurance. So the idea is that if as I think Liam said, if insurance requires that you collect more than you pay out for that to be an effective profitability model. A money system where there is a $1 trillion coin and then USG actually starts to write checks against that doesn't change much about what happens further down the line. It potentially saves the US government a little bit in the interest that it pays to the Federal Reserve banks. But whatever the specifics can be the basis for a different position paper. The overarching idea is that the position paper has to deliver what the slideshow promises.
Correct. Let's keep going, Govert.
I hear you.
We got a
Yes.
lot of people on the stack.
We got Joel Hodroff next.
And then I think Mark Pash had his hand raised next.
Okay, so Mark after Joel.
So I just want to make a couple of comments on what might draw attention to this cause that's being overlooked in healthcare in general. Healthcare economics is upside down. A heart attack is a major economic event. So is cancer, diabetes, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, while preventing heart attacks reduces the GDP. In other words, in this money chasing paradigm that puts money at the center of the economic universe, we do everything like through a Rube Goldberg machine, lifting people. So the social determinants of health are exactly what determines good health, not a gigantic financial insurance system. So what are the social determinants of health? Did your family grow up with a job? Did you get nutrition and healthcare education, moderate exercise, reduction of stress through meditation and yoga? There's a million things that are healthy that aren't promoted inside the economic system. What's promoted is, as people are noting, the money-making part, but we can go straight to the good health. What I mean by a Rube Goldberg machine is that our system to try to help people will build a welfare system, a food shelf system, a food stamp system, as opposed to give out the tiniest amount of purchasing power to walk into the grocery store or restaurants. So I want to talk to the people who understand that it's not the evil rich. They didn't invent this system. It isn't even chasing profits. Profits can drive a lot of good. It's the broken inherited system from scarcity that's money-centered, because the profit motive can just as easily drive green, drive wellness, drive anything as chase money. Give me one more second to end on what I think. If we understand that we're drowning in wealth, what I've been calling excess capacity and chasing money, we would notice that all the wealth to meet need is sort of like lying on the ground as excess capacity. Restaurant tables are empty more than they're full. Food's an abundant renewable resource and global agribusiness wants more customers. So there is a model for distributing more purchasing power that doesn't raise taxes, increase debt, or take numbers out of computers away from billionaires, because there isn't a billionaire family alive on the planet that can eat enough food for anybody to go hungry or consume enough healthcare for anyone to go without. We're very confused about money, numbers, and computers and wealth that we're actually drowning in. Longer discussion, but I just wanted to put it on the stack.
Thanks. Mark Pash, I think is that name.
Mark, unmute. Mark,
There we go.
unmute. There we go.
There we go. I thought the leader did it. Well, my comment is, why in the world would you want to start with healthcare to promote monetary reform? You've heard some of the reasoning already. It's a very complex operation. It's got massive problems. It's hard to market. Our mission will get lost in it. It should be the last thing we discussed. And if you want to look at my book, I barely even touched on the topic. And the third thing is, it's not a monetary scarcity that's causing the problem, as is converting in the environment, getting a better environment. If you looked at Virginia's slide there, you notice that we spend more than anybody. So there's plenty of money. And if you look back over economic history in recent times, the most inflationary, far exceeding the regular inflation, has been healthcare and universities. And the reason they have a higher inflation is that they have massive access to money wherever it comes from, whether it's government spending or insurance spending or employers. So this would be the last topic that I would do to promote monetary reform. The environment is better, inequality is better, because that's where there's a shortage of money. So I would say shelf your position paper on this topic, because you're going to create so much controversy. Look at Hillary in the early 90s, and then Barack Obama barely got it through. And then Franklin recommended universal health care in the late 1930s. And it took 70 or 80 years even to get a vote on it to a degree, except in 1965 when we had Medicare, which works reasonably well. So I would say shelve this one and go to one that we can actually create money and solve the problem. Because money is not really a problem in so much in universal health care and actually even universal education. That's my comment.
Yes, yes. Yeah, loud and clear indeed. Anybody wants to react to that from the team?
Well, I mean, I said we got so many people I want to get in, so I think. I know
okay, otherwise we'll go to the next stack.
Yeah, let's just go to the next stack, and then when you
Okay.
decide, we can just kind of pause and we can comment on everything we've heard.
All right. Next is Paul. Paul, unmute. There we go.
Joe Polito, but go ahead.
No, next. I think next is Joe.
Okay.
All right, well, okay, I thought we may want to just hear everybody else first, but maybe I could jump in before it gets a little too far afield. I've also been looking at the comments here, and we do have a range of philosophies, and this is exactly what we are struggling with. One thing, I just kind of had a slight change of my opinion. I went into this feeling, as many said, that we're not experts on healthcare. It's very complicated. There are people who have done quite a bit of research on how to fix the healthcare system. But one thing that they don't take into account is, suppose you had the money available to accomplish what your models or whatever your schemes were trying to achieve. They don't fold that in from the very beginning. It's not input into it. So these actual healthcare models that people come up with, you know, they always, the excuse is, well, in the end, it's going to cost less. But it doesn't matter. If it costs less, if it costs more, money's off the table. You can kind of go back to the drawing board, redo your models, redo your statistics with the thought, without having to worry about, do we have to fight politically over getting the money? You know, another thing is, so again, I've had a slight shift in that people are not aware that monetary reform has to go input into the solutions that they think they already have. And I think it changes, it's a real paradigm shift. It's a game changer. If you go in thinking, we have the money, now what do we do with it? I have to differ a little bit, or not so much differ, but maybe we need to refine our definition of what scarcity means. Clearly, there's a lot of money floating around. The problem is the misappropriation of money and the maldistribution of money. So it's scarce where we need it, and it's plentiful where we don't. So we have to bear that in mind when we throw out the term scarcity, because people say, oh, money's not scarce. Well, it's true that it's not scarce, but it's scarce when it comes to the things that we need, like the Green New Deal, free education, universal health care, all those things. So just, again, I gotta be careful about the words that we use, and then we're all talking about the same thing. The other point I want to bring out, and this kind of pertains to the discussions that we had, is some people are concerned about government kind of getting in and mucking things up. And I have to say that one of the fundamentals of just monetary reform is something like the NEED Act. And right there you have government. Government is part of it. So we don't believe that we can just give money out and then step back. There has to be some government participation, and it has to be a democratic process. That's our only stipulation. So I was just again noticing some things in the chat, and I wanted to address those.
I think the last one is Joe Gover. I think.
Yeah, Joe Polito is at this moment. And then we got Franz, and then I got Paul again, and I got myself.
Okay, I think Paul just covered this stuff. Go ahead.
So Joe.
Before I ask my questions of the committee, say well said, Paul, and Mark, you made me kind of question my assumptions, and I'll have to read that book. And finally, Govert, that was a phenomenal compilation in your study stack on the conference.
Did you ever get time?
Thank you. I'll put the link into the chat.
Yeah.
And put it into this study stack about another study stack.
So I put in my notes in the chat there. My 3 questions are, in listening to the formatting concepts, it kind of reminded me of Axios. I don't know if anybody's looked at that I think it's a fairly new news service. And they start out with a nice little news item. Then they say why it's important. And then they say go deeper. So it's kind of nice, and it's a stepped in process. And maybe that kind of concept could be applied to the slideshow approach. The second thing I want to ask about is if you considered using tuition as a kind of a companion issue to the healthcare. Tuition isn't so complicated. It does affect an extraordinary number of young people, and all those young people have parents and siblings and grandparents and so forth. So it's a huge issue. The New Yorker just did a terrific long piece on that issue, and it's really worth reading on the overall concept of debt. And the third item was Positive Money has. I wonder if you looked at the Positive Money website. You probably have, because I think it's a lot like yours. On the question of money, they sort of did a sub website, and they ask. I think they've tried to simplify, because Positive Money has gotten very complex and very large in their website. And the link I put was on sovereign money, and in that section, they talk about the transition. I think is a really important issue to explore. Like, how would you do this, right? How are you going to get from here to there? And they do explore that, and it certainly influenced me. And I sort of referred to it a few weeks ago about this notion of the central bank providing the money to the government so they could provide, address a lot of the issues that Just Money is interested in. Social justice, get things done for the people. And they sort of say, if you started with that, then the banks need to create money would shrink. And they also looked at CBDCs, central bank digital currency. That's another kind of little avenue in they address on that page. So it's nice and simple. It's just a couple paragraphs. And I think it's the kind of approach that you're advocating here. Nice, simple approach to address a few issues, get people thinking about essential things in their lives, and a nice, simple path into them. So I just wondered again if you had considered some of those issues, like the debt and kind of a step-in approach.
Joe. I think, if I'm not mistaken, well, you had a stack. And then after that, why don't we just go to,
I think I had Frans Verhagen.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, first Frans, then Paul, if he likes again, because or he put himself twice there, and then I'll take.
Yeah, I started thinking what the best approach is. If we want to make an impact, probably as Carly was saying, in terms of Instagram, where you get proper classifications, then we have to ask ourselves, how do we want to come to a statement that is clear and a kind of consensus statement? And of course, a group can make two short PowerPoint presentations, but the question is, what will be the outcome of those two? And so the real challenge then becomes to get a kind of consensus document. And I think one of the proper or one of the usual ways is that somebody who is really interested in the topic writes a position paper, and then it is being marked up. And so people can hear, no, people can read what other people have said, they can react to it, or they can react to the position paper itself again. And in that way, you really get depth. And also, you at the end, you will have a certain consensus. And so the original writer of the position paper will take all of that into account and then finally come up with a position paper. And that position paper can, of course, be subdivided to many subdivisions so that you can create a pipeline for the Instagram series. So I think, so, and in order to do this, I think the first question may be, who is interested in what, and who is interested in preparing a position paper on a particular topic, and then people can sign up. So we need a little survey to know what people are interested in, and then people can sign up, and then they can start working. And of course, all of that happens virtually by email or maybe Zoom, etc. So, so in that way, one can have position papers that are the result of really in-depth discussion by people who are interested in a particular topic. And then it can be forwarded to the website on Instagram or otherwise. That's my little 2 cents contribution here.
No, I think that's very worthwhile. That you know, because first of all, let's say that this is you know, we're just getting into this whole thing, and we're just getting into Instagram and handing over some of the tools to the younger people instead of the almost dead white people that are running the show. But you're totally right. We can have different people do different things, and depending on their interest, they will put in the, you know, the time and the energy to create something. So yeah, point taken. Paul, you want to go again? No.
No, no, I'd like to still hear from others. I'm furiously taking notes here. So.
Okay. Well, next on Stack. You want to say something, Mark?
Well, I just put myself on Stack. I was looking for other people, but I didn't see anybody else. I seen a lot of comments, but none.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Be after me then.
Okay.
What did I want to say here? I'm going to share a screen just to make clear what we are about. And just to give a structure of our priorities. And I'm saying share, but I don't know if it's shared.
Yes.
Folks, can you see this?
Yes.
It hasn't come up yet, but.
My screen is paused. maybe it's not working because now I don't see it.
You want me to go ahead while you get lined up?
All right, folks, you can see it or not?
No,
No, it's just a black screen.
Okay.
Oh,
There
now
we
we
go.
see it.
Yeah.
we do. Yes.
There you are.
Okay. So this is how I conceptualize the structure of what we're up to. It's basically 3 big points, but they are hierarchized in priority. Our first priority is the 3 prongs or pillars of minimal monetary reform, and Mark very quickly referred to that, but that is our 3-prong thing that we are after. A, nationalizing the money supply, no more bank credit money. B, constituting an independent entity to manage the money supply. We mostly refer to that as the Monetary Authority or the MA. C, or 3, spending authorized debt-free money into circulation through government entities or straight to the citizenry. That's the core of what the Alliance is about. The second one would be the original or traditional things that central banks and money management would aim at. Price stability. We talk a lot about, having a system that's non-inflationary and non-deflationary. B, full employment, but now there are questions about that because things are getting automatized, so maybe you don't need full employment. And C, growing economy, which is mostly expressed in GDP, but I can replace that with a happiness index or a well-being index.
what about decarbonization as a third monetary mandate besides price stability and maximum employment?
Could be.
Because
all the other items, Frans, I put under 3, which are elective policies to be decided by Congress. Infrastructure projects, healthcare, education, parity pricing, universal basic income, paying off the national debt, tax cuts, etc., etc., etc. So I see your point that you could, depending on how big the crisis is seen, that you put decarbonization or the climate crisis under 2. I would still put it under 3 as part of what Congress in a democratic way will have to decide about what it will do with the money that it can create, as far and as long as it doesn't create inflation or deflation. With that, I'm just gonna stop sharing and get back. What I want to add to this is that I'll take Liam's point very serious there, that if we do something of a larger Instagram strategy, we first have to go to 1. We first have to get the message of what do we mean with monetary reform.
Yes. What about fiscal dimension? And you see, most people think when they talk about monetary reform, I think a distinction has to be made between financial reform, fiscal reform, or transformation, and
what we're about.
Yes, and see how those 3 subsystems of the economy, how they interact. And so I think that is what I would add on to the first one, which I think most of us who are here agree about those 3 points. We can explain it a little bit more in terms of those 3 dimensions. But I feel very strongly that we, as civil society organization, that we can make a demand. And I sent Paul an op-ed piece that I sent to the New York Times about 2 monetary
two monetary imperatives proposals for the Biden administration. And both of them, they deal with decarbonization, first as a mandate, which is more or less a reform. But the second one, the more important one, deals with a global system change of having an international monetary system based on decarbonization. And for me, you see people also when you say growth, some people say degrowth. Yes, that's all very nice. But the most important thing we have to think about is that civilization will survive and thrive. And that is not impossible if we don't take care of the whole climate business. I feel very strongly about this because that's what I've been writing about. And that's also part of my second book, the sequel to my 2012 book.
Maybe we need to have a particular coffee house on your proposals. I've read some of it, but I don't grasp it fully yet. I won't lie to you. So, but
I would be very happy to do this because I can make those comments, but one really has to start from the beginning where people are at and then gradually build it up.
Okay.
To a full kind of thing. And so finally, I've come to the conclusion of 24 imperatives. And I call it the Global 24 Initiative. And that might be something for us really to put ourselves on the map.
Well, we'll, Bo and Howard and myself, we'll definitely contact you about a future coffee house, probably early next year. We have some open slots. And so we can come and we can talk about your proposals. But
Okay.
if I can, what I want to do is I want to bring it back to the purpose of this particular coffee house, which is, people are we're kind of losing focus in that the purpose of these position papers is to bring people into monetary reform. And so, for instance, Mark asked, why in the world would we pick healthcare? I think we said the same thing in the committee, actually. Why did we pick this particular topic? But when you think about it fully, I think every topic that we could come up with is going to have the same type of back and forth and dynamic about how you want to present it. And so one reason is that, and I'm looking at a Pew Research, that the top issues for voters in the 2020 election, the second issue was healthcare at 68%. That's why we're doing healthcare. It's because we want to do positions that reach people where they're at. I don't think that on this list, even though I agree with what Liam said about considering starting in a different way with more of a base on just money or monetary reform, guess what's not on this list? Monetary reform. So if I'm not interested in monetary reform, why am I going to click on it? And so we have to think more strategically than just what we're used to talking about if we're trying to build a popular movement. Remember, this is an education and advocacy, so we're trying to grow. Now, we are growing. We're growing slowly. When we first started out, it was the same 8 or 9 people on these meetings all the time. Now we're up to the same 25 or 30 people, which is good. But we really want to have 600 or 700 people. We want like some groups have 500,000 people because we feel like that's what it takes to actually get a substantial movement to actually literally change the world, which is what we're talking about. And so I just want to take it back to that's why we're talking about these specific issues, because we're trying to reach people where they are and tell them this is a solution to your problem. So whether that's healthcare, UBI, college, the environment, debt, taxation, whatever that issue is that rings in your head, that gets you up every morning, that makes you vote a certain way, those are people we're trying to reach. And so that's why we're doing this. We could very easily sit back and say, well, let's just talk about the 3 prongs and leave everything else alone. Well, we would probably just be sitting just like this with the same 30 or 40 people 5, 10, 20 years from now, because it's not touching people where they are, unless there's a huge catastrophe and we're the only thing left, which I don't want to go through that. I would prefer not to go through any type of huge catastrophe to get monetary reform done. So I just wanted to bring it back a little bit to what we're talking about and what the decision is we're making. I see Paul, go ahead. I see Mike and Paul on the stack. Actually, Mike Holden and then Paul.
Yeah, so Mark, I agree with you fully on that. You know, that was my understanding going into this, is that, you know, if you look at the research, it clearly shows that, you know, a Medicare for all or national health care, most people are not familiar with the specifics of those. But, you know, having a healthcare system that is not controlled by private insurance is supported by the majority of the people. That's proven. I mean, that's in the data, no matter how you phrase it. And so I don't think we really need to go into the semantic details of that. If you want to say something, I think, you know, simply approaching like monetary reform supports Medicare for all or something like that. I think that does have powerful messaging, even though you might not agree with maybe the very details, you know, all of the different specifics of it. I think as sort of like an overall approach, you know, again, if you're trying to resonate with people, then according to the data, then Mark, I totally agree with you. That would be a good message to send. And so for the purpose of reaching out to other organizations, as Greg Coleridge was saying in the AMI conference, to go horizontal, I think that is the right approach. So yeah, Mark, I fully support.
Thank you. And also, I just want to add before we go to Paul and Stephen's also on the stack, is that a part of that reason that in the slides based on my position paper was that you've seen the ors in there is because it was kind of to present different solutions that are possible in monetary reform. And so the last one I think is kind of the Medicaid for all kind, or you could not even have any payment and just pay for healthcare. It's also another portion of it. But go ahead, Paul, and then Stephen, or vice
Hey,
versa or whatever.
I've been told that I was not loud enough. Can you hear me now? Is this okay?
That's better.
All right. So thinking about what Liam has said about, you know, first putting out, you know, what we're about first, and then talk about, you know, solutions. This is a dilemma that we've been struggling with from the very, very beginning. And especially some of the newer folks here, ask yourself, if we said, oh, this is monetary reform, we think it's a good thing. The first question that comes in people's minds is why? Why should I care about this? So we try to lead with, here are the problems. And maybe people have different ideas of what they consider their high priority problems. I kind of agree with Franz that our existence is pretty up there on the list. But if we just throw out monetary reform, who we are, without some way of grabbing people's attention that this is actually important, it's not just some angels dancing on the head of a pin kind of thing, or some ivory tower concept. So any input that we can get from the people here is how to do both at the same time. Get what monetary reform is out from the very beginning, but also to grab them so that they want to find out what these three tenets are of monetary reform. And we're not always successful in doing that. I know in my personal interactions with people, eyes immediately glaze over if you talk about monetary reform. Oh, money, I don't know anything about money. They don't want to hear it. So if somebody can formulate a way of crafting the message, I'm all ears, because this is, again, something we've been struggling with for quite a while.
All right, next we go to Stephen, and after that, there were some people with the same question for Mark Pash. So Stephen, go ahead, and then we'll go to Mark.
Yeah, I just want, Mike spoke my mind actually when he said to go horizontal and made reference to Greg's presentation on move to amend. They went horizontal recently with three other organizations, 4 in total, and they had a 2-day conference together. Another possibility, though, in developing these position papers with these Instagrams, you know, we could have a little conference, you know, in a few hours, and we invite 4 or 5 organizations, and we share Instagram slides, and we just have a social hour afterwards and communicate, and then, you know, and there's cross fertilization that goes on. We become a little more aware. When I went to the Move to Amend, I learned more about you know, a Black perspective on the Constitution, an Indian perspective on the Constitution, and a woman's perspective on the Constitution. And I didn't have that before. And so if we can do some of that cross-fertilization and sharing of Instagrams, which is a cool format, and it's an inexpensive format because the tradition has been video and I liked Carly's slides too. They were a little more, they're simple, but they're cartoons and they just catch the imagination. You know, I told Mark Pash, who's here, you know, if you look at the preface of his book, it's much more imaginative. And I'm trying to do some writing, and I think catching one's imagination is just a big deal there. So thank you for a great time, and I look forward to the last 15 minutes too. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So Mark Pash, the question a couple of times that came up, going back to what you were saying, the question is, what are the priorities you would place before this organization that are, you know, a next step after monetary reform, or something by which, you know, where we can best, according to you, spend sovereign money? Unmute, please.
Here, okay, there I am. There's nothing wrong with social media and internet to get the word out. And the youngsters, and it's definitely not me, could really do a lot of stuff. I've talked a little bit with Virginia about doing it for our books. So that's number one. The topics I think what we were talking about, and I think the number one bugaboo, if you know, for my industry is not healthcare, it's taxes. So it depends on who you talk to. And, you know, I just had a thought that, you know, this group sounds extremely left, okay? Which means when the right wing reads a lot of this stuff, they just slough it off. And, you know, most people don't even do that. So we might want to consider communicating a little bit more towards the right and the business right and the working people and the 70 million people that voted for Trump. And I think Trump, if it hadn't been for the COVID virus, Trump would have won again. And he runs on economics. So that's the best answer to the question. I think that's the cheapest way to go right now is social media can be very inexpensive. And people get, you know, they have a rat carrying a piece of pizza gets, you know, 1 billion views or something around the world. I mean, that's obviously what we want. So I don't know if that answers their question.
I think they were more looking like, okay, where would you spend the money? You say, okay, spend it somewhere where you'll have tax reduction maybe. So you will appeal to.
No, I would say, no, we had everything we spend is tax deductible if you give it through the nonprofit. I would say that we've talked about hiring a social media specialist. If you're talking about spending our marketing money that we don't have, you mean? Is that what they're talking about?
I think they were talking about, I think they were in reference to some questions. You probably didn't see them in the chat, but you had a lot of comments on some of the stuff you talked about. So
okay.
A taxation paper is a position that we were going to do, but Paul actually did one on taxation and I did it on healthcare. We got even more arguments, I think, over policy. Oh,
yeah,
we went with the healthcare paper. So those are tried to date.
Well, I'm looking though that you know, Steve Zaliga, I'll never forget the day that he says the hardest thing about monetary reform is communicating it. And of course, we're still struggling with it. And of course, he struggled with it his lifetime. I've only struggled with it for about 30 years. So we just got to keep doing as much as we can. And when you throw in, my thing against healthcare was that it's really not a significant monetary problem. and everything can be solved by monetary reform.
Yes.
But what current things can be
Yeah, for
solved
you.
by monetary reform? And that's simpler and not as political. And I'm looking at it strictly as a marketing thing rather than a specific policy. And I think the environment would be better. I think taxes would be better, as I mentioned, and also universal income, which attacks
Sir,
inequality, would be
Wake
better.
up.
I don't know who that is. Can you see who that?
They told me to wake up, so I'm trying to wake up.
I think she's talking.
Although it's earlier here for me, you know, I'm in the middle of dinner and I'm missing my Ram game for this, so I want to let everybody know that. So you can imagine 30 years of rejection gets a little heavy on you because, you know, I market to our leaders. So, but I just keep doing it and we have to keep doing it. And the best we can do is, you know, I like the social media aspect where people will do their Twitters and all that. And I've never even been on Twitter. I don't even know what it looks like, or Instagram, never even seen an Instagram. I barely got to texting. Okay. So I think it's wonderful because it's inexpensive.
Well,
And
Mark,
you could just do it.
the only thing I would push back on slightly is the fact that I think what I tried to demonstrate is that you can have a position on healthcare that does not upset the left or the right.
Well, I think you can too. I was just
So that's
questioning.
where I was going with it, and that was my purpose.
I was questioning the order. Because as you saw, everybody had a different opinion, different in complexity, and it's been highly inflationary because they have a lot of access to money like the university systems have had. And I just don't think it's the right thing to do first. Last, yes, okay, as one of our position papers, but first, you know, you're going to get, look at Hillary did in the early 90s. I mean, she just got blown out of the water and she had all the power of the presidency. And then you look at what Obama had to go through to get that. And meanwhile, you look at Medicare, and I've been on Medicare for 9 years now. And I'm licensed in healthcare insurance, so I know a lot about it. And Medicare, it's got its little problems. Medicare is wonderful, especially when you're a $6 million man like me, okay? But it's an incredible system. Can it be improved? Yes, administratively, but they're trying. But it's just an incredible healthcare system. And it's much better than the private insurance companies because they pay less. You should see how for cancer treatments, the difference of what they allocate. I mean, it's like for chemo, it's like 5,000 to 10,000, and the doctors are charging 70,000 to 100,000. And you know, we're going to enter into that discussion. And in 1965, when they passed Medicare, the Republicans were against it because they thought all of us individuals on Medicare would take the advantage of it, but it's the opposite. It's the providers that has taken the advantage of it. But basically it's a good system. And a lot of the systems are run by private enterprise, the Medicare Advantage system, the Medicare supplement system. The only one that's run by government is just the basic Medicare system, the A and the B. The rest are run by private companies. So
it's heavily regulated. Yeah,
it's just, but medical economics is so out of whack. And you heard it from Tom and Joe, how out of whack it is. And it's just so complex. And I've listened and read to some of these solutions, and it's just horrendous to try to get involved. So if we get involved in that argument first, I would like to pull back and say, let's do that one last. Okay.
But that's possible.
That's just my market. That's my marketing experiments.
I don't think we made the decision that one necessarily has to go first. That's just what we worked on so far. So we definitely have to take that into consideration.
But obviously, to communicate monetary reform, we've decided this a long time ago, is that you have to show the benefits.
Right.
And we can take monetary with very simple distribution factors of loans and gifts and grants and investments and solve the environment problem. we can explain it very simply. And also in infrastructure, we do the same, even simpler with infrastructure, repair and everything. And but medical economics, it is a nightmare.
Point taken. Hey
Yeah.
guys, we're down to our last 4 minutes. Go over, and I'm gonna turn it back over to you. I think I've seen a couple other people on the stack, which was
I still had Mike. Then probably
close it out.
Yeah, then we'll close it out. That sounds good.
And one more thing, John, I see you have a lot of comments in the in the chat. Next time you're gonna have to speak up, buddy, because you have some good ones over here that that we need to discuss at some point in time in the future. So.
I can't do two things at one time. So reading chat and listening, I just can't do it.
No, that's true. That's a little bit the downside of an active chat.
Yeah.
But Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of reinforce that it depends on kind of what you're going for with your messaging, right? I mean, if you want to take the approach that, you know, it's a synergistic effort, meaning that monetary reform can help with healthcare. You know, again, as Mark was saying, the healthcare system as it is, healthcare economics is out of control. The pricing is totally out of whack with anything that's reasonable. There is no real correlation between the actual cost, and there's such a differential between nation to nation. So, you know, as far as whether or not it's a polarizing issue, I think maybe that can be a good thing, because polarizing issues, they can be more engaging for people, you know. So again, it depends on the kind of approach you want to take. If you want to say something that may be a bit more polarizing, like support for Medicare for all or universal health care, then, you know, I think that's one approach you could take. Or you could take, and this may have benefits as well, taking an approach of, well, how could we help to supplement healthcare and what solutions we have? Again, I support a rigorous methodological approach. And so I really think that we need to understand systems dynamics and modeling of the economic system if we really want to have conclusive proof as far as what we should do, how to structure the system most effectively. And hopefully, you know, I see John Howell was on here today as well from the Research and Policy Committee, and perhaps we can put together a few things pertaining to, you know, economic and scientific modeling approaches.
Well, you realize they are being done, right, by Yamaguchi and others. The systems
Precisely,
dynamics.
yes. Yep. Oh yeah, Yamaguchi, and that would be my proposal as well. Is you know, Yamaguchi's systems dynamics analysis in Japan should be replicated for here in America. I think that's a good thing that would help us all to understand the system. You know, his presentation was very effective, I think, and even from previous years, you know, that sort of systems dynamics approach should be understood, and that's how we should really frame the subject of monetary reform and designing the specifics of the system.
I have to correct you. Yamaguchi did model the American Monetary Act, which became the Need Act.
Right.
So he did his work there. If you go to the bibliography, the extensive one, you'll find a lot of his papers from around 2010, 11, and 12 addressing that.
Yeah, I wasn't saying modeling the NEED Act, but I was saying, you know, his presentation at the conference this year where he modeled the US system. So yeah, you can model a theoretical system, that's great, but what you really have to do is show a correlation between the real world and the model that you propose, and that correlation doesn't really exist. So what I was trying to bring the attention to is understanding from a systems dynamics approach, you know, the model of the current system, and then how to most effectively model a monetary reform system to show the specific details of how the system should be implemented. That would be the approach I would support.
Then we have to get the heavy guns to do that, like Steve Keen or Yamaguchi. Also, the Dutch Finance Lab is doing modeling. It goes a little bit above my head, but it's something that we can look into. Folks, it's 9 o'clock. want to close just with thanking this team with their presentation and their slides. And you know, I'll make a study stack and we'll see if those slides get in there or not. And you'll see what will be presented. We haven't decided yet on a next, because usually in December it gets a little dicey. But do sign up for the newsletter. Go to our website and sign up for the newsletter, because usually through the newsletter, we will try reasonably in advance to tell you what the coffee houses will be. And of course, we are sending it out through the email, through MailChimp. So if you're on that list, stay there and stay tuned. Any last words from Mark or any of the presenters?
For me, just thank you guys for your feedback. We will definitely have another rousing committee meeting to decide how we'll move forward. But thanks again for your feedback and for listening.
And if we can just have a couple of minutes, Howard, from Lucille, our president.
Sure, thanks, Phil Young. Just want to say thanks to y'all for being here, and also a quick reminder. I don't know, a week or two ago, there was an email encouraging you to fill out a quick member interest survey. If you didn't do that, please do it. It would be great to have more of you involved in more ways than just coming to this, but this is an important way. And if you're not yet a member of the Alliance, it costs a mere $20 to join. And we'd love to have you as a member. So that application is on the website too. But thank you, Mark, and the whole committee, Mary, Paul, Virginia. I'm probably missing somebody, but
Carly.
great. Carly, yes, Carly. Yikes. Great work. Thank you. Very probing. That's it.
All right, folks, stay tuned. More to come. Hope you get excited. Hope you got a little taste of the kitchen of the Alliance.